This is a special edition of the MeidasTouch podcast, a breaking news alert. We are now learning that a federal judge has dismissed the indictments against James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Both dismissed because Lindsay Halligan was determined to have been an unlawfully appointed interim United States attorney by the Trump regime, that the regime previously appointed someone else by the name of Eric Siebert to be the interim United States attorney. You only get to have one interim United States attorney. You don't get to just fire that interim and then get a new interim. You then would have to go through what's called the appointment clause under the Constitution. They did not go through the appointment clause, which requires appointment by the president, then confirmation by the Senate as it relates to Halligan, because there was nobody else in the room with Halligan when she got those indictments of Comey and Letitia James. There was no one else who signed the document. You can't retroactively go back in time with the time machine and say that, well, Pam Bondi said that she was actually there, even though she wasn't there. That didn't work. And so the federal judge by the name of Cameron McGowan Curry from the Eastern District of Virginia said these cases will be dismissed. Now, they're being dismissed with what's called without prejudice, which means that if a case can be brought within the statute of limitations timeframe, a case can be refiled. So this potentially has different ramifications for Comey than it does for New York Attorney General Letitia James, because the Comey case was brought on the last possible day of the statute of limitations. So now the statute of limitations expired as it relates to Comey. So it would seem the Comey case is basically done. They can't refile that case. They have the potential ability to refile the case against Letitia James, but they're now going to have to find a new federal prosecutor who is validly authorized, who's willing to go into that grand jury room and put their bar license on the line. And the only person who was willing to do that was Lindsay Halligan, who had no prior experience as a federal prosecutor before in her life. She was a beauty pageant contestant turned insurance lawyer, who then was Trump's personal lawyer on some things. And then Trump was like, hey, nobody else in my DOJ wants to file these cases because they're utterly frivolous. And in fact, they were rejected by the Republican federal prosecutors who worked for Trump. So then Trump sent that message to Bondi, hey, can you bring in Halligan? Halligan will do it. And then that's what they did. They brought in Halligan. They fired the Republican interim United States attorney in Virginia. Halligan went into that room all alone. We've reported on all of the other defects that took place in the grand jury room with Comey, whether it was Halligan giving false instructions about the law to the jury, whether it was Halligan not even securing an operative indictment as it relates to Comey and just had the foreperson sign a rejected indictment, whether it was putting on an agent who was exposed to attorney-client privilege information against the law. The agent should never have testified in the first place. So we didn't even get to all of those issues yet, but those were possible grounds for dismissal. But Halligan was unlawfully appointed in the first place and shouldn't have even been in that room. And that's what this order by Judge Curry is all about. Now, Judge Curry was referred this case by the Fourth Circuit. The trial judges who are handling the Comey and Letitia James case would not handle this specific motion. They handle the proceedings as it relates to the trials in those cases, but it's a little bit of a complicated procedure. The case gets transferred by the Fourth Circuit, which oversees the Eastern District of Virginia, to another judge, because when you're dealing with the issue of potential disqualification of the DOJ, it could potentially make a conflict for a judge to rule on both disqualification and merits of the case. So that's why these types of motions get referred to another judge. And this is Judge Curry, who reviewed the facts here. And this is what Judge Curry held. We'll go First, to the Comey ruling. We'll go to the last page where we see the actual ruling by Judge Curry. For the reasons set forth above, it is hereby ordered and adjudged as follows. The appointment of Ms. Halligan as interim United States Attorney violated 28 U.S.C. Section 546 and the appointment clause of the United States Constitution. All actions flowing from Ms. Halligan's defective appointment, including securing and signing Mr. Comey's indictment, were unlawful exercises of executive power and are hereby set aside. The Attorney General's attempts to ratify Ms. Halligan's actions were ineffective and are hereby set aside. Mr. Comey's motion to dismiss the indictment is granted in accordance with this order. The indictment is dismissed without prejudice. The power to appoint an interim United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia pursuant to 28 U.S.C. Section 546 during the current vacancy lies with the district court until a U.S. attorney is nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate under 28 U.S.C. Section 541. We'll just go through those things quickly right here. The statute, 28 U.S.C. Section 546, provides for an interim United States attorney who can be appointed for a finite number of days by the president. But once that term expires, it can be extended by the federal judges of that district. And if the federal judges of that district do not extend the term, that person has to go. Now, we've seen other examples of this. We see this with Alina Habba in New Jersey. She basically an unlawful interim United States attorney. The district court judges said, we're not extending your term. You're not a good United States attorney. Get out. And we're talking about judges who were appointed by Republicans and Democrats, from Reagan to Bush to Trump, saying this, to be very clear, bipartisan basis. We see this, for example, in the Central District of California. We see this in courts throughout the country where Donald Trump has been appointing these interim unlawful United States attorneys. Now, if you were saying, well, what can you do to fix this? Well, if you want to fix this, hire qualified United States attorneys, appoint them, have them go in front of the Senate, Donald, right? Donald Trump controls the Senate, right? The Republicans, unfortunately, control the Senate, and then go and get your nominees confirmed. And then Donald Trump will say, oh, but the Democrats are preventing them from getting confirmed. They have what's called a blue slip, and they don't like these United States attorneys. That's always existed in the history of the United States. So pick competent and qualified people, and then the Senate will confirm these people. That's what it is. But that's not what Donald Trump did here. By the way, Eric Siebert was the former interim United States attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. Siebert was a qualified career prosecutor who said there was not and by the way, he was someone who the Democratic senators in Virginia said that they would be willing to have confirmed. But Donald Trump didn't want his own Republican interim United States attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia to be confirmed because this individual would not bring these frivolous cases against Donald Trump's political enemies like Comey and like James. So I just want to let you know that's why they brought in Halligan, who's never been a federal prosecutor in her entire life. She didn't even intern for the office. So she goes in there all alone, unlawfully, all alone. It'd be like if I showed up. It'd be like if you showed up, because we don't belong there. So she shows up and she screws the whole thing up too. And this order, we don't even get to the screw ups yet that she made. And for, Halligan, the reality is Halligan may view this as a blessing for her. Like, thank God I was declared unlawful, because the other judges were about to rule on my other unlawful conduct, which could have hurt her even more than her being unlawfully appointed in the first place, right? Which is that she got the indictment without freaking showing it to the grand jury. The first indictment that she presented with Comey was rejected. The grand jury left. Then she just had the foreperson sign a second one that the grand jury didn't even look at. And then she brought in an FBI agent who shouldn't have been there because the FBI agent saw attorney-client information. Then she gave false instructions to the jury about the Fifth Amendment right and basically acted like Comey didn't have a Fifth Amendment right, and the burden of evidence shifted to Comey. She gave him all the wrong information when it comes to the law. But the courts didn't even have to get to that. They just said, you shouldn't have even been in the room in the first place, Halligan. So we're dismissing without prejudice. That's the term. Without prejudice against Comey and against James. Now, without prejudice again means the DOJ can rebring the case. But in the case of Comey, statute of limitations has expired. In the case of James, statute of limitation has not expired. However, what United States attorney, what federal prosecutor is going to go in that grand jury room when we see how patently frivolous the case is against James? When the Fair Housing Department made internal memos saying that no crimes were committed, and then they were fired by Bill Pulte and the Trump regime for saying that she did not commit any crimes. What federal prosecutor is going to lose their bar license and go in there right now and bring this case against James? Hey, Bondi, why don't you do it, tough guy, tough gal? Hey, Blanche, why don't you do it, tough guy? Why don't you go in there? If you're so confident in it, why don't you go to the grand jury and present this case? Why don't you do it? We'll see what happens there. But as it relates to Comey, statute of limitations has expired. Going through some of these other points that the judge makes, here, the judge talks about how Pam Bondi's attempt to ratify the conduct of Halligan does not retroactively allow Halligan to have been appropriately appointed. Remember, Pam Bondi filed declarations in November saying, oh, yeah, I've read the grand jury transcripts. I was cool with this. I wasn't in the room, but I knew what was going on. I'm cool with it. By the way, that's going to screw over Pam Bondi in the long run because she just ratified some of the most unlawful conduct that I was just talking about before. The FBI agent who didn't belong in there, getting an indictment signed off on by the foreperson, but not the actual grand jury itself, getting an operative indictment not signed by the grand jury and presenting it to a court, providing false legal instructions. So Bondi's going to have to contest with that in the future, but that's what the court means right here when they talk about how the attorney general's attempt to ratify Halligan's actions were ineffective and are hereby set aside. But this is beyond humiliating for the Trump regime, what just transpired. To put in this stooge, Lindsay Halligan, with no experience at all, to show up there, to utterly humiliate herself and the regime. She was not even allowed to be there. As I said, it would be if you or I walked into the room. It's like trick or treat. It's like Halloween. It's like playing a game. Hey, everybody, look, I'm here. It's like, who are you? You don't belong in here. And that's what this order said. And folks, we've never seen so many orders from federal judges before saying that an administration is hiring these fake interim United States attorneys. You know why? Because competent administrations in the past, whether they're Democrat or Republican, you just do it the right way. You just do it the right way. And if you put someone in charge who's competent, the federal judges extend the term of the interim. Once the time period expires, the federal judges, if you're qualified, will say, of course, we'll extend the term. Why wouldn't we extend the term of the person? But because the Trump regime put so many unqualified people in, the judges have not been extending these terms. And this is on a bipartisan basis. So we just went over Comey's right there. Let me show you Letitia James, the order right there as well. From the same federal judge, Judge Curry, looked at both the Comey case and the James case. They were consolidated before Judge Curry. She was the judge who just determined the issue of disqualification, while the trial judges were dealing with the trial motions in the James and Comey case. And here is what it says in the Letitia James case. It says, Ms. James now moves to dismiss the indictment on the ground that Ms. Halligan, the sole prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury, was unlawfully appointed in violation of 28 U.S.C. Section 546 and the Constitution's appointment clause, which you now are all experts in after watching my summaries, as explained below. I agree with Ms. James that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid. And because Ms. Halligan had no lawful authority to present the indictment, I will grant Ms. James' motion and dismiss the indictment without prejudice. And here's the things, folks. If the Trump regime just sent in any other federal prosecutor with Halligan to the grand jury to actually put their name on this indictment, and I mean anyone, it could have even been a first-year associate working at the federal prosecutor's office, a first-year assistant United States attorney, anybody in the room at all. And normally in a grand jury, you wouldn't send somebody alone. First off, you would never actually send the United States attorney, the top federal prosecutor. They don't go into the grand jury rooms. They oversee the office. So even someone in Halligan's position, as fake as Halligan is for pretending to be in that position, that's not the person who shows up to a grand jury room. Who shows up is the assistant United States attorney, your line prosecutors who are actually handling the cases. Those are the people who present to the grand jury, not the United States attorney. But in any event, if all they did was have any other prosecutor other than Halligan who actually worked in the office there and signed their name, what the court could have at least found is, well, Halligan didn't belong there, but there's at least another federal prosecutor who was there. Someone else's name is on the filing, is on the pleading. So we're not just going to completely dismiss this case. We will allow, if they want to put in another prosecutor on the case, that's great. But there's at least somebody else in the room. You see, because Halligan was the only person who went in the room, that's why what functions as a result of this order is the dismissal without prejudice. So while Trump and MAGA, they're going to be whining, well, we're babies, we're MAGA babies, right? At the end of the day, you're idiots. Just send somebody else in the room with Halligan, and you don't have the problem. And then for all the MAGA people out there who are going to be, I'm MAGA, I'm a baby, I'm a crybaby, I'm a MAGA crybaby. Why was Lindsay Halligan the only person who went into the room? MAGA, you telling me you don't have any good lawyers out there? You couldn't find one actual federal prosecutor? What, is the deep state so strong that even in Trump's DOJ, Pam Bondi couldn't find anybody? No one from a first-year United States assistant attorney, from an assistant United States attorney, from another, you couldn't find a single person. It had to be Halligan, a beauty pageant contestant turned insurance lawyer with no federal prosecutorial experience. That makes sense to you, MAGA? Is that part of your MAGA mush brain logic right there? And that's why these cases, folks, are getting dismissed. And we knew this would happen because if you looked at the outcomes across the country in other cases where Trump has hired fake United States attorneys like Alina Habba or in the Central District of California, we've seen the same results happen. And so, of course, it was going to happen. And it was far more flagrant what happened here in the Eastern District of Virginia because you already had the interim United States attorney who Trump appointed. Trump's guy was a guy named Eric Siebert. Eric Siebert was the Republican who replaced the Biden guy. But because Eric Siebert, who Trump appointed, was supported by the Democratic senators in Virginia, and because this guy Siebert refused to go along with Trump's unlawful prosecutions, they fired him. And then they brought in Halligan. And the federal judges extended the term of Siebert. They like Siebert because Siebert, he may have been a Republican, but he was a career prosecutor. He knew what he was doing, and he was the right guy for the job. You may disagree with him a little bit on politics here or there, but he was a career prosecutor who was respected. So the federal judges extended his term, and then Trump fired him or pushed him out because he would not go after Comey and James, and then Trump put in his stooge, Halligan. Just take a look at the order right here. Conclusion, for the reasons above, this is Letitia James. It is hereby ordered and adjudged as follows. The appointment of Ms. Halligan as interim United States attorney violated 28 U.S.C. section 546 and the appointment clause of the Constitution. All actions flowing from Ms. Halligan's defective employment, including securing the indictment, is hereby set aside as well. So it's the same for James as it is for Comey. The one thing that Comey has is that the statute of limitations expired. So they can't bring that case against Comey again. Now, of course, they're going to try to appeal it. I'm sure there'll be an appeal filed any moment now. They will lose those appeals, okay? They will lose appeal after appeal, and I think they will even lose in the Supreme Court because the law is crystal clear. They will lose the appeals against James. Now, if they try to refile against James, as I said before, what federal prosecutor is going to go into that grand jury room when we know how patently unlawful the prosecution is against Letitia James, right? It is basically a ticket at this point for disbarment, in my view. So I suppose that they can try to find somebody who is willing to do that. They can try to find someone who's, after seeing the record about how vindictive the prosecution is, who can try to do that. But stay tuned. Stay tuned on that. So that gives us about, I think I covered about everything right there. I guess I could take some questions from the YouTube channel. We have the orders right there. I was pretty efficient in covering it. Let me take some questions. Why don't I do that? Why don't I open up Professor Meiselas' classroom? I'll take some questions right here, put in the YouTube section below, and I'll do my best to answer your legal questions. Not about anything, about the cases, obviously. But a big day, justice having been served for those joining us right now. The Comey indictment dismissed. The James indictment dismissed right there. Halligan, the Trump DOJ, in a world of trouble. Someone said they should charge Trump for the expenses of those two people. They have strong malicious prosecution cases against the Trump DOJ. And trust me, James Comey and AG James are going to sue the crap out of them. The problem ultimately is that who pays for these settlements? The taxpayers ultimately pay the settlement, right? When you sue the DOJ and the federal government, it's the taxpayers who end up paying this. Is it possible to see the disbarment of Bondi as well? It is. I think the disbarment of Bondi will take place, though. Those proceedings I don't think happens until after she's the attorney general. She ratified Halligan's conduct, and ratifying that conduct, I think, is, utterly makes you just as responsible. And the conduct being ratified, one sending an unlawful interim United States attorney in to get fake indictments, right? The fact that the Comey indictment was never even shown to the whole grand jury, the fact that you had a FBI agent testifying, he was the only person who testified against Comey, who was exposed to attorney-client information, so he was a tainted witness who was not allowed to testify at all. And then you have the fact that Halligan was providing false legal instructions to the jury, essentially saying that Comey didn't have a Fifth Amendment right and the burden to produce evidence was on Comey. All of that right there, to me, is stuff that could be found to make you lose your legal license. But I mean, I think that when history is written, Bondi's got to worry about more than disbarment. I mean, Bondi is a war criminal. I mean, let's just talk for a quick second about what's taking place right in Venezuela, where we know, and off the coast of Colombia and Venezuela, where we know the top military lawyer for Southcom in that area said that these extrajudicial killings are war crimes. Don't do them. We're going to be war criminals. Everyone in the chain of command, a war criminal. Pam Bondi overruled that. The DOJ overruled what the military officer had to say. So my view is that, yes, Pam Bondi should lose her legal license, but my view is she's a war criminal. And I think that she should be held to account for war crimes, for murders, for executions, as should everybody downstream from that chain of command. That's my view right there. And she's going to continue to dig in her heels to cover up the Epstein files. I mean, just think about it, that Trump and the DOJ are a PPP, a pedo protection program right now. The question is, can we get rid of Habba right now, Alina Habba? Well, technically, we already did get rid of her. She's like, she's just staying in the office. She doesn't belong in the office, right? She's like, basically, what's the What's the terminology used when somebody stays in someone's house after their rent's expired? That's what she's squatting. She's just like, she's actually squatting in the office, and she goes out and she like dresses up and she pretends to be a United States attorney, and anything she does is basically unauthorized at this point. And so just think about the criminal cases that are being tainted by having her there, when we have to actually deal with real crimes and real law and order. This may result, the questions are more questions about disbarment. It certainly may result in disbarment. Lots of questions there. Is an appeal to the Supreme Court possible? It is. They will appeal this in the next 30 minutes, of my guess. By the time I'm done with the stream, they will have done an appeal to the Fourth Circuit. But remember what happened here. The Fourth Circuit referred this to Judge Curry, right? Judge Curry's not the trial judge in either the Comey or James case. So the Fourth Circuit, where this appeal is going to go, they've blessed the proceedings to have Curry make this determination. So the Fourth Circuit wanted Curry to issue a ruling and to hear these facts. So to me, the Fourth Circuit is going to easily, clearly, and quickly reject any appeal. Then the Trump regime will appeal this to the Supreme Court. But there's really no legs to stand. I mean, there's no legs to stand on here. And I know the Supreme Court makes awful rulings, and so you never know what they're going to do. But the statute is as clear as day, although I guess in MAGA world, day is night and night is day, and up is down and down is up. But when you take a look at the statute, 28 USC section 546, it's so clear. You get one shot at an interim United States attorney before that person is confirmed by the Senate. So under the Appointments Clause of the United States Constitution, let's just make this very simple. We'll pretend we're in my law class. Under the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, the president appoints certain positions, and then they have to be confirmed by the Senate, right? So Trump has to appoint the United States attorney, confirmed by the Senate, then they're no longer interim. Then they're the United States attorney. They're duly authorized. So for a finite number of days, a little bit over 100 days or so, you can appoint an interim United States attorney under 28 USC section 546. Okay, that period of time can be extended by the federal judges, because let's just say there's a holdup in the Senate and the Senate's not ready to confirm, but this person's just doing their job right, and the district court judges who are appointed by all political parties, right, in a specific district. So here, the Eastern District of Virginia, but HABA would be the District Court of New Jersey. If we were talking about New York, there's the Southern District, the Eastern District, the Western District. If we were talking about California, right? I live in the area by the Central District, but then there's the Southern District, which is San Diego. And then there's the Eastern District, which is like Bakersfield. Then there's the Northern District, right? Which is like San Francisco. Each of those districts has a United States attorney. The president has to appoint that person, and that person has to be confirmed by the Senate. And if they're not confirmed, they can stay as an interim for a finite number of days, and those days can be extended by the district court judges who have been appointed over the years, from Reagan to George H.W. Bush to George W. Bush to Clinton to Obama to Trump and Biden. They all make up these judges in these courts. So with someone like HABA, they did not agree to extend her because she's horrible, right? With the guy in the Central District, they did not agree to extend him. I think in Nevada, they did not agree to extend her. There's lots of places where the judges are saying, we're not going to extend these people, and they haven't been confirmed by the Senate, so they're done. They're no longer the interim, okay? Lindsey Halligan pretended to be an interim United States attorney after the actual interim United States attorney was fired. And so the judges were like, you got one shot. Interestingly, in Virginia, the judges liked the interim before Halligan, this guy, Eric Siebert. They said he was doing his job. But that's why Trump hated the guy, because he was doing his job. And he's like, I'm not doing frivolous cases. The Eastern District of Virginia is a very serious district. They handle a lot of counterterrorism cases, a lot of public integrity cases, right? Because it's proximity to DC. You need serious people. Eric Siebert was a career prosecutor who happened to be Republican, and he was given the support by the Democratic senators of Virginia. So Trump hated the guy, and hated the guy because he wouldn't pursue frivolous cases against Comey and James. So Trump gets rid of Siebert, installs Halligan, and the statute says 28 USC 546, you get one shot at an interim. So at this point, Halligan's basically no different than a trick-or-treater. She's playing dress up, right? So she shows up. It'd be like if you or I showed up, a pretender. So if it gets appealed to the Supreme Court, the analysis I just gave you is going to be the analysis, and that's just going to be, and that's going to be it. So we'll keep you posted every step of the way, but this is one of these stories and reports that, look, the MeidasTouch network was built on. And I hope you appreciated this detailed coverage as always. Do me a favor, become a member of our YouTube page. If you like reporting like this, become a member. I know you're probably already a subscriber, but by becoming a member, you help grow this independent media platform. And that's how we've grown. So, and you can gift memberships to as many people as you can. So you click that join and you can gift memberships, and they can access people can access the emojis. And then I do a special podcast with Ron Filipkowski. So check that out, and go to MeidasPlus.com as well. That's our Substack. You can check out our daily analysis on Substack, MeidasPlus.com. And while you're at it, subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast on audio in addition to YouTube, and leave a 5-star review on audio. That helps us out a lot in the audio algorithm, where we're very competitive as well. And it's important that we stay number one across all of these platforms. Meidas Mighty, always a pleasure hanging out with you. Always a pleasure trying to use my legal knowledge to help break down some of these daily stories. And whoa, did we have a big one this morning. The indictments against James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James have been dismissed by a federal judge. You can go back and watch the full analysis of the YouTube video if you're just checking in now, and keep checking in on the MeidasTouch videos throughout the day. We just dropped another one at 10 a.m. before I got this news, but it's jam-packed with a lot of information, including a call that Donald Trump just had with Xi Jinping, who basically called and threatened Trump. I cover what just took place with Russia rejecting the proposal by Europe after Trump tried to launder the 28-point Russian plan and pretend it was the U.S. plan, but just use Google Translate to try to force a surrender on Ukraine. Russia's now responding to Europe's plan, and Russia's saying it's not supportive of that. Surprise, surprise. They preferred the Russia-Trump plan. And we're also going to follow some more information that it seems like some other MAGA Republican Congress members may be resigning in addition to Marjorie Taylor Greene. So all of that's in the analysis that I just posted. So that's the 10 a.m. video, which just launched. So when this ends, go check that out right now. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. I'm Ben Meiselas. Shout out Meidas Mighty.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.